السلام عليكم. Inshallah, we have a guest khatib, Shaikh Yusuf Rios, inshallah, and he will give the khutbah for today, inshallah. After khutbah, we have this khutbah and then the next khutbah, inshallah. If you want to give the udhiyah for any country, inshallah, after khutbah, you can give it, inshallah. We have different countries. We have Palestine, Syria, Yemen, Africa. Any country you want to give, inshallah, after khutbah, and you wait for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, inshallah.
السلام عليكم. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
إن الحمد لله ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهدي الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله ونصلي ونسلم عليه وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين وعلى أصحابه بجهدهم قام هذا الدين فرضي الله عنهم أجمعين. In this khutbah, we wanted to focus on the life of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. We're going into the month of Dhul Hijjah, into the season of Hajj. And we wanted to take some lessons because the Quran, it tells us لَقَدْ كَانَ فِي قَصَصِهِمْ عِبْرَةٌ لِلْأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ, that indeed there's lessons and there's stories for those that have intellect, that they reflect. That's important because when we reflect upon the Quran, we should take something from it. And these stories, the stories of the Anbiya and the Salihin and the nations that came before, they give us lessons. And so when we look in the Quran and we see the dialogue between Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala and the Malaika, the angels, they question with regard to the human being. Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala told the malaika, Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa. And the angels, they questioned with regard to what is the meaning of that. Khalifatullah fil ard. They knew something, not details, that if a human being will be placed, that there will be fasad, and there will be bloodshed, and there will be corruption, and there will be what we see today. But Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala had a different plan. And when we take this ayah of the Quran and we apply it to the life of Ibrahim, we begin to get some deep lessons. Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam is an important lesson for us, especially for الناس الذين تركوا بلادهم والآباء الذين عندهم مشاكل مع الأولاد. Ibrahim is important for those who migrated from their countries to another place, and for those parents that have struggles with their children, and for those youth even, which I didn't mention, those youth who struggle with their identity when we look at the life of Ismail. Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, from a young age, he understood Tawheed. He understood it naturally. And what they say, some of the ulama, was his father, or some say his uncle. He was a person, and he kana yasna' al-asnam. He used to make idols, and he used to make money from it. So his job was in shirk. And so he upheld shirk. And Ibrahim at a young age, he resisted that. And Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, as a Hanif of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, he also lived in a society where the political leader wanted to be worshipped. And he also was in a society in which the religion at the time was pure shirk. This was al-Jahiliyyah al-Mahda. It was similar to the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam with Quraysh, except Quraysh, they still had some remnants of the teachings of Ibrahim. They still had some Tawheed in that society. But Ibrahim and his environment, it was nothing like the Jahiliyyah of the time of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. And because he had a commitment to his identity as a Muslim, he left. His people, they tried to kill him. Remember when the angels are having that dialogue with Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala about these human beings that will create corruption? What more corruption is there than shirk? They even reached the point of trying to kill and murder Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. And Ibrahim, in the time that he was amongst his people and his family, he was making the da'wah to Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. He looked for their benefit. He even tried, what we say, asalib mukhtalifa fi da'wah. He tried to call to his father in a loving way. Lam yakun mutashaddid fi ad-din, so to speak. He wasn't someone that was rough and someone that was condemning, but he tried even in a loving way. And it ended with him breaking his relationship with his father. Now imagine, we know that Silat al-Raham, that our relationships in our families are something that are extremely important, but because of this reality, the reality of shirk, it came to a point where they had to divide. Because he was violent. His family was violent toward him. Wallahi, we see that with some of the people that convert to the deen in today's time. They convert into Islam and they end up in the street with no support. Sometimes we even see that they convert to Islam and they're in a workplace and they start to look like they're Muslim and practice like they're Muslim, and they end without a job. We saw that after 9/11, how many Muslims lost their job because they identified as Muslims in a society which had blamed the Muslim for certain realities. People, the reality of Tawheed, to carry the reality and the weight of Tawheed is a weight. In the meaning of Khalifa, which each one of you, there's a taklif The Khalifa means that we're responsible for the reality of Tawheed and the Deen. You can't escape it. And then for the Arabs, even more of a responsibility because of the reality that the Quran came to you in the Arabic language. Because there was a Nabi that came directly to you, alayhi salatu wassalam. In other words, يعني هوية العرب متعلقة بالدين حقيقة, for those who are Muslim. And so there's no separating from your identity or your culture and the deen, which means that we have to return back to the deen. The Hijra of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam was a hijra in which he left his people, he left his family, he left his land, he left his wealth for the sake of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. And he traveled the dunya like that. He went to Egypt, he went to Palestine, he went to Mecca. And when he got there, Ismail was not from the Arabs, but he became known as the father of the Arabs. The author of Minhaj al-Haraki fi Sirat al-Nabawiyya, he gives us a lesson that the deen is based on principles. The reality of hijrah, the reality of migration shows that if a believer migrates from one place to another, like in the case of Ibrahim, alayhi salatu wasalam, like in the case of the Sahaba, radiallahu anhum ajma'in, like in the case of the Prophet Muhammad, alayhi salatu wasalam, that when we migrate from one place to another, believers, wherever we go, we take our principles in the deen. In other words, it's not a matter of saying that now we're in a different land and we eliminate our identity, or we just get lost with what's going on in the society. The Khalifa of Allah in the earth, which you are, the one that takes the responsibility for Tawheed, understands his relationship and her relationship to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. Ibrahim suffered because of the reality of Tawheed. If he wanted to establish himself in the land of Iraq, and may Allah liberate the people of Iraq and establish them, he could have stayed in that region with the people of Shirk, with his family, and been okay. His father was making money and wealth. He could have continued in that business, expanded. But he opposed that because he was from the Mu'mineen. He opposed that because he was from the Muwahideen, from those who are from the people of Tawheed, from those who declare Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala to be free of Shirk. When we struggle with our identity, this is what we have to remember. That no matter what changes, we may be learning a new language, or we may be eating new food, or we may be in a new environment. All of that is irrelevant if we don't understand who we are in our relationship with Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. Ibrahim, he learned multiple cultures. Ismail went into a new culture and became from those people, but he never forgot his identity. And in the story of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, we find that one of the biggest debates that he had was on who is Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. Some people said that Allah was the sun and the stars and the moon. Other people, they had idols that they worshipped. Other people said that the leader had the power over life and death. Ibrahim had to clarify all of those issues. All of those realities he had to clarify. And then even what we see, what came from Ibrahim later, from his supporters, was the Prophet Lut alayhi salatu wasalam. And we know that in Lut's society, they struggled with their identity, with their sexual identity. And in that society, they lost who they were in relationship to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala's commands. It's unpopular to say. Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam didn't have any supporters except his immediate family, like the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. But then after some time of working with the dawah, he gained support. People We're at a time period in which if we don't support the da'wah to Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, we ourselves would get lost. Because we will have no environment to practice the deen. We ourselves will get lost because the environment will pull us in. Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, he was strategic. He even wanted his grandchildren and his great-grandchildren to be established in the deen. And he asked Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala for that, but it wasn't promised. Just like Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam had to make a sacrifice, and he had to make hijrah, and he had to undergo suffering. Every generation is tested in their commitment to Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. There's no free ticket. There's no chosen people. There's no one that just says La ilaha illallah and that's it. And they just enter into Jannah without having to prove their test to be true. And that test is to see what is their commitment to La ilaha illallah. It's not easy, people. Every Muslim community on the face of the earth is being tested in multiple ways, whether economically or politically. Some of them are forced to be refugees on the face of the earth. Others are forced into poverty. Others are forced into prison. Others are forced to change their mentality as Muslims. Others are forced to change the structure of the family. Everybody on the face of the earth right now is at a test from every angle. There's no way to escape. There's no land to go without this test being the same test. This is not like the time before. You go and you make hijrah from one place to another place. Everywhere you turn to on the face of the earth, there's some tests that the people are going through. And it has something to do with their commitment to Iman. When you look at the condition in Haiti right now, they just had their leader assassinated. When you look at Barbados, they just got hit by a hurricane. When you look at Philistine, they're wiped off of the map. When you look at the conditions in Egypt, they just sentenced so many ulama and others that were trying to struggle for the deen into jail. When you look at Morocco, it's poverty. When you look at what goes on here in our cities, you see what we just went through with the issue of racism and the issue of discrimination. We went through a whole pandemic where the whole world was shut down, and we still haven't learned the lessons of the necessity to return back to Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. Economies were shut down from one virus that came. Whether you believe it or don't believe it. So in the lesson of Ibrahim, we learned the importance that we have to be clear. Who holds the power over life and death? It's Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. Who controls the sun and the moon and the stars in the universe? Is Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. Who controls the keys to health and sickness? Is Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. Who commands us to justice? Is Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. And that's why we find in the Quran that always salah and zakat come together. Because it's not just an issue of praying people, but in the marketplace as well, we have to be people that are just. In our stores, we have to be people that are the ones that are showing the reality and the values of the deen and the da'wah. We hear that story on a regular basis. It was the tujar that were going from Yemen to places like Malaysia and other places like that, the businessmen, the traders, that were at the forefront of the da'wah. Brothers and sisters, we're here in these lands now. We're forced out of our situations. If you aid Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala and His deen, solely by just communicating to the people just the basics of the da'wah, then you relive that reality of what Ibrahim wanted. Just one word or two words in supporting the da'wah. Knowing that, okay, if you don't even want to give da'wah like that, know that as if your name is Muhammad or if your name is Ahmed, or even if you change it to Mo, the people are going to know who you are. And they're going to look at you and see how you are and how you interact with them. And that's how they're going to learn who a Muslim is and who a Muslim is not. But if your interaction with them is one that at least is based on the sifat of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, on his qualities and his behavior and his characteristics, then that person may be a person that comes into the deen through you. And if that person comes into Islam through you, all of their deeds come to you. And even if you were just a person that the only thing that you did was just establish the salah, on the day of Yawm al-Qiyamah, that comes back to you to intercede for you. Because of at least what you did was share with the people was goodness. Yani, الذي يخالط الناس بالخير سيكتسب ما الذي قدمه لله تبارك وتعالى. This is a fundamental point of Iman. This is a sadaqah. Those who approach the people in goodness, Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala will reward you for that. This is Iman, that we believe that every good deed that you do, this is the difference between the believer and the kafir. That when you give, and here I'm not talking about giving of your money, here I'm talking about doing good in the dunya, that is rewarded, it counts. Doing bad in the dunya, that is punished and is acknowledged. And that we all are in need of the mercy of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. And so we leave with this reflection. In summary, we find Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, although he struggled with his father, and this is for the brothers especially, he made sure that his son was from the people of Tawheed. We're in a time period where we're paying attention a lot to the sisters and the young girls, but our boys are being lost. And so the fathers have to look at that reality of what it is that they do in their relationship with their sons. Is not enough to just come to the masjid. You and your child is out there in this society lost. This is to go against the main lesson that we learn of Tawheed, which is one in which we're striving to have a relationship with Allah, and we're striving to change the culture and the society so it can be pleasing to Allah, and we're striving to have a family which is pleasing to Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر لي ولكم والحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. We ask Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala for our brothers and our sisters throughout the world that are suffering. And we ask Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala most of all for our children and for our families, for our husbands, for our wives. And we ask Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala for those who have died before us, to alleviate for them, to make it easy for them, to forgive them. And we ask Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala to make us a path of hidayah. And we ask Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala to bless this masjid and establish it and all of his members. And we ask Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala to allow us to be people of da'wah and to be people that call to the deen. Aqimus salat.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
استووا ولا تختلفوا فتختلف قلوبكم. Please shut up your cell phones. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين
اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. I want to remind the brothers about the udhiyah for Palestine, Syria, Iraq, and the African countries. You can pick whoever you want to give to, and there's a form. Huh? So there's a form.
السلام عليكم. احنا يعني السنة هذه this year إن شاء الله we will give it to the 4 places إن شاء الله from the masjid: Palestine, Syria, Yemen, and Africa in general إن شاء الله. Palestine إن شاء الله will give it to Islamic Relief, the share and the cow, 1 share in the cow, $2.99. They don't have sheep for Palestine. Syria will give it inshallah to Sawasiya, the sheep $2.25 والcow $1,400. You can take 1 out of 7 inshallah for any cow يعني. Yemen will give it inshallah pure hand sheep 150, and the share in the cow 152. يعني 150 in the as a share in the cow or sheep. Africa from 90 the sheep and 550 for cow. Inshallah, if you want, you can stop by the office, choose the country as we mentioned now, Palestine, Syria, Yemen, or any country in Africa. And inshallah, we'll give it Palestine for Islamic relief, Yemen for pure hand, Syria for Sawasiya, and Africa for Africa relief. You choose what you want, inshallah, and we will give it to them, inshallah. Barakallahu fiqh. Of course, al-Udhiyah until the fourth day of Eid. Udhiyah until the fourth day of Eid, inshallah. Barakallahu fikum wa jazakumullah khairan. In your behalf, we thank Shaykh Imam Yusuf about his khutbah and visiting our masjid. Jazakumullah khairan wa taqabbal Allah minna wa minkum.